Of course, the virus affected not only our meetings at the Kingdom Hall, but also our circuit assemblies, regional conventions, and special conventions. So the governing body decided to cancel all live regional and special conventions for 2020. That led to a landmark convention program on jw.org that the entire brotherhood enjoyed.
Well, once vaccinations became more prevalent, we faced another challenge. The United States branch was struggling to get vaccines for those in the Bethel family who wanted them.
So in early April 2021, we called together a meeting. We had all the key individuals there from the various departments, and everyone was given an assignment. And within 2 weeks, we had enough vaccine to vaccinate everyone in the U.S. Bethel family who chose to be vaccinated.
Well, about a week later, we sent a letter to all branches, encouraging them to investigate the availability of vaccines for special full-time servants. We were especially concerned about special full-time servants serving in lands where the government was not yet making vaccines available.
After that direction went out, we had a tremendous response from a number of branches who were able to obtain vaccines for special full-time servants who wanted to receive them. Several branches said that it had seemed impossible to get vaccines in their country at that moment. But they prayed about it, they followed the direction, and then either that same day or the very next day, Jehovah opened the doors and suddenly they had the vaccine.
All of these events occurred rapidly. And even though it was difficult to make so many adjustments in such a short period of time, we could see Jehovah's hand in the governing body's decisions. Television, radio, video conferencing have all served our brothers well, which just goes to show that Jehovah was guiding the governing body as they made these decisions so early in the pandemic.
Does it though, John Ekron? Does it show that? I'm sorry, am I missing something here? We're being shown this timeline, this coronavirus response timeline, that's exactly what you would expect of an organization struggling to cope with a pandemic. And here they're talking about vaccines. They were previously talking about Zoom. Zoom, a service provided by Satan's system of things. Vaccines, a life-saving drug provided by Satan's system of things. Again, I feel like I'm going crazy here. How are they taking the credit for those things? How are they pointing to those things and the availability of those things and the speed of availability of those things in the case of vaccines as being evidence that Jehovah was exclusively helping them? What do we then say about the 20,000 plus Jehovah's Witnesses who've died from COVID? What's the explanation there? If you're going to credit Jehovah's blessing, Jehovah's hand, for the positives, for things going right in the pandemic, what do you then say about Jehovah's hand and Jehovah's blessing when things go wrong, when things go tragically wrong to the point where people die? And let's remember, hate to make this personal, Mark Sanderson, but Mark Sanderson's own father died during the pandemic. We learned in the 2020 Always Rejoice convention. And speaking of that convention, we heard Stephen Lett there talking about how the decision to cancel the conventions was made on April 1st, or that's when the direction went out. As I said earlier in this rebuttal, the pandemic was declared on March 11th. And you have literally lists of organizations and countries around the world on Wikipedia on that date or in the following days making these same decisions more quickly. It takes Jehovah's organization 3 weeks. 3 weeks to decide maybe we shouldn't have conventions. Well, not maybe. We shouldn't have conventions, let's be clear. It takes them 3 weeks to make that decision. And that's evidence of Jehovah's hand. Again, I'm not seeing it. Viewers, can you see it? Maybe I'm just missing something here. But what I'm seeing is exactly the sort of timeline you would expect of a religious organization that is caught unawares by a deadly pandemic that the whole world is having to come to grips with, and the whole world is having to make decisions and figure out how to navigate through this. And a big way, let's be clear, I realize there might be some watching this rebuttal who are anti-vaxxers. A big way we've been able to get through this pandemic, and it's not over yet, I realize, is through the development and availability of vaccines. And quite frankly, how dare this organization try to take any kind of credit for vaccines being available? This being an organization, let's remember, that dissuades people from higher education. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, if you're growing up in the Jehovah's Witness religion, you are literally dissuaded from going through college or university. You are literally dissuaded from aspiring to the sorts of professions, the sorts of roles in the scientific community that have led to the vaccines being available and lives being saved, including the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses. So for any organization other than the organizations that have come up with the vaccines to be taking credit for the vaccines or for the availability of the vaccines is inappropriate and distasteful enough. But for this particular organization that sets its face against higher education and higher learning, that has resulted in the availability of these life-saving vaccines that have again saved the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses, is absolutely disgraceful.
You know, we've always appreciated the direction we received from the faithful slave, but at that unique time especially, it was so encouraging to see Jehovah use them to make these major decisions. And they made many that 1 week in March.
Although there have been many challenges and sad times during the pandemic, it's been amazing to see many positive developments. So many inactive ones have returned. So many Bible studies have been started.
We saw how Jehovah guided us through, decision by decision, step by step. And seeing how Jehovah led us through this situation has helped me to see that regardless of what is going to come up in the future, Jehovah is going to do the same thing.
Like scriptures say, we get our plagues. Yeah, those times, but overall, when you're in Jehovah's arms, what's to worry?
You could say every one of the governing body's faith was strengthened as we got through this trial, and it's just a continuous thing of our faith being built up and how Jehovah is directing us, and He's preparing His people for life in that new world, the real life that's coming.
It's been a real privilege to see Jehovah's Spirit in action during this pandemic. It strengthened our faith to see Him use the governing body to provide scripturally based direction, keep the kingdom work going, and all the while showing respect for life. As a result, our trust in Jehovah's organization is stronger than ever before. And building this trust now is vital because Jehovah is preparing us for future events, including the Great Tribulation.
Including the Great Tribulation. Yes, we've still got that to look forward to, folks. The coronavirus pandemic may have claimed millions of lives, may have resulted in all this upheaval, but you just wait until the Great Tribulation comes, eventuating, of course, in Armageddon, when there'll be worldwide carnage, and it will make the coronavirus look like just a flash in the pan. Yeah, they're all about pushing this doomsday rhetoric, aren't they? Isn't it bad enough that so many people have died from this pandemic? Again, including tens of thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses. And according to the organization's own admission, I saw this in a document, I'll actually show it on the screen if Tibor is gracious. According to the organization themselves, they have lost a disproportionate number of followers, of brothers and sisters to this pandemic. No explanation given as to why that is. So you're actually kind of more likely, by their stats and according to them, you're statistically more likely, for reasons unknown, to die if you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses compared to the general population. No reason given. And here they are talking about so many positive developments. We had a good memorial attendance. That makes everything okay. Inactive ones were returning. People were beside themselves in terror and fear, thinking it was Armageddon because they were still holding on to their indoctrination, and these ones returned. Hallelujah. You know, that's their whole message. I'm sorry, I'm looking at this organization and I am seeing nothing unique in the fact that a pandemic hit and they responded. And how distasteful of them to use this, again, as an opportunity to capitalize on it, as an opportunity to point to their authority. Isn't this what all this is about? The authority of the governing body. Mark Sanderson there going on about Jehovah guiding them decision by decision, step by step.
We saw how Jehovah guided us through, decision by decision, step by step.
I'm sorry, Mark, I'm just not seeing it. Again, the organization could have done far worse. I'm glad that they implemented social distancing. I'm glad that they used Zoom. I'm glad that they cancelled the conventions and the memorial in person. I'm glad all of that happened, but they were just doing what they should have done. And quite frankly, it's not like they're doing the right thing in other areas. In areas like child safeguarding, for example, they're not doing the right thing there, are they? And you can sort of see why the coronavirus pandemic would be more of an urgent issue to a group of men who are aging and who may have pre-existing medical conditions. You can sort of understand why they might panic with this particular pathogen and do whatever is needed to play it safe. I'm sorry, that's what I'm seeing here. I'm seeing self-preservation. And when we look at the stats, when we look at how the organization has fared in this pandemic, you can talk about memorial attendance all you like. You can flash your timeline on the screen and talk about how you felt like Jehovah was guiding your decisions. But ultimately, the organization shrank in terms of members. And by your own admission, Jehovah's Witnesses have been dying from coronavirus at a disproportionate rate. So how is the COVID-19 pandemic anything to brag about, especially to the extent of saying this proves that we're God's one and only true organization? I also hope you noticed a distinct difference between the stage voice of the governing body when they were speaking in this segment and the normal voice. We talk all about Stephen Lett, don't we? And about the fact that he has such an odd way of talking. I feel this particular segment highlighted just how contrived, just how artificial his stage voice is, better than anything I've seen before. And frankly, he wasn't the only one putting on a bit of a voice.
Our schedule for the whole year had already been planned. We had shepherding visits to branches, regional conventions. Seeing how Jehovah led us through this situation has helped me to see that regardless of what is going to come up in the future, Jehovah is going to do the same thing.
There was an all-time peak of 21,367,603. We get our plagues. Yeah, those times. But overall, when you're in Jehovah's arms, what's to worry?
After prayer and discussion, the entire governing body decided not to have a live audience for the Gilead graduation that weekend. That was unheard of. Every one of the governing body's faith was strengthened as we got through this trial, and it's just a continuous thing of our faith being built up and how Jehovah is directing us, and He's preparing His people for life in that new world.
Wasn't there a big difference there? Isn't it interesting? Granted, it's not as noticeable with Mark Sanderson. I actually think this comparison shows that he is actually quite a natural speaker out of all of the governing body members. I'm actually surprised, quite frankly, that they don't use him more, because his stage voice is definitely closer to his normal voice, although there is still a difference. But then you move on to Toni Morris, and it gets more noticeable, the drop. The voice just drops like an octave or whatever it is. When he's speaking sincerely, when he's speaking without a script and just saying what's on his mind. And then you get to Stephen Lett, and it's just a completely different voice, isn't it? A completely lower voice, a completely more sincere and compelling voice, quite frankly. I'm astonished that no one's tapping him on the shoulder and saying, you should be using that voice in all of your stuff, quite frankly, Brother Lett. Why the stage voice? So we can hopefully put to bed this idea. Some people float all these theories about how he's worked with deaf people and this voice that he uses is part of that. No, I'm sorry. I've spoken to his niece, Brandy Schmiedel. Thumbnail here if Tibor is gracious. It's all a made-up, contrived stage voice that he's developed over the last few years. And what's interesting is no one has the bravery on the production team that was involved in this segment, this horrid segment, again, exploiting disaster, exploiting death and misery and plague to promote the organization and to promote the power and authority of a small group of men. No one's had the bravery to say, maybe this shows that the whole thing is fake. Maybe by asking the governing body to deliver part of it on auto cue or most of it on auto cue, and then at the end to just open up and speak extemporaneously, maybe we've inadvertently showed that they're fake, that they're faking it, that the whole thing is an act. They're putting on an act to dupe people. I love the fact that this segment, as horrid as it is, at least drops a very strong hint in that direction.